Anxiety is the root cause of majority of office visits. We know that 75% of all office visits to primary care physicians like myself are related to stress, and anxiety is probably what I would consider the major stressor in our lives. Unbeknownst to us, we just call it stress in our world. If you think about what stress is, there's virtually 3 forms of stress that exists in all of our existence. We stress our bodies in an emotional way, a physical way, and a spiritual way. And the physical and the spiritual, I believe, have been very neglected in our society because the emotional burden that is placed upon us that causes anxiety is so great. That anxiety really comes from what I consider plainly the sheer number of choices that are given to us as Americans. We've been inundated with millions and millions of choices that's exponentially grown over a period of just 20 years. What was a cup of coffee 20 years ago was decaf or regular, is now 40 different coffees on the wall of a Starbucks. And the choices that you have between television stations. As a child, I grew up with 4 TV stations. My daughter has 400 to choose from. And I think those little choices, every time you make a little error in your choice, when you order a cappuccino instead of a latte, damn, I wanted a latte. Or you're flipping through the TV dial and you watch the program for 5 or 10 minutes and you're watching that and, this is a little bit boring. You start clicking down the dial, you're like, damn, I really wanted to watch that, I missed that. And you recognize that each one of those elements are exponential hits to our psyche. They become exponential, they add together, they cumulatively add together, and they create a degree of self-doubt or insecurity in your ability to make decisions. And if you ask me, that's exactly what anxiety is. It's a lack of emotional confidence in your ability to make a decision. Anxiety harms us in several different ways. One, it distracts our energy from us. So when I recognize that probably 60 to 80% of the individuals that I see in my office are so-called fatigued, are complaining of tiredness, you have to ask, well, where has that energy gone? And I certainly know that in America, we're not doing all that well physically. We've neglected ourselves so much so that, considering that just 150 years ago, 90% of Americans still lived on farms, and evolutionary pressure should have dictated that over hundreds of thousands of years, we evolved in an environment that required us to have unbelievable physical skills. How are we doing in our worlds? Pretty neglected, right? Pretty neglected. We don't have the energy to invest into our physical abilities. It gets actually deeper than that, because when you realize that when people are physically active, they feel better. Their energy level's better, they sleep better, their mood's better, they eat better, everything's better. Yet they don't do it. And I used to think that Americans unfortunately just got fat and lazy, but I realized they are truly fatigued. It also detracts from your spiritual energy, and that's a little bit more of a difficult concept we might discuss further in the future. When I talk about spiritual energy, I'm talking about understanding what your soul is, understanding its purpose and its meaning, and trying to define that. We find a lot in our country that we invest our spiritual energy into what we consider religion. And religion to me is the politics of spirituality. And really it's not a function of what the religion brings to you, it's what your soul needs to bring to it. And people have missed that point, and we've been neglectful of that. Waving to your neighbor in church is not what I consider spirituality. The problem is that the emotional burden that all those choices create in our worlds detracts from our ability to invest energy elsewhere and exhausts us, making us all want a simpler life. If you think about what anxiety is and where it comes from, I said earlier that anxiety is a lack of emotional confidence in your ability to make a decision. It's insecurity, it's self-doubt, it's worry, it's what if, it's anger, it's all of those negative emotions that you play with, and that's the only place they come from. Anxiety really comes from what your perception of the future is going to be and what your past burdens were. It detracts from your ability to appreciate what this moment offers you. This moment offers you an unbelievable amount of joy if you can take advantage of it. We miss that moment because we're so concerned, so fearful of what our future holds, worrying about it, saying what if, knowing that expectations, how often are expectations really fulfilled to your wildest dreams? Also knowing that how often are anticipatory fears ever as bad as you build them up to be? You can't predict your future, yet we expend so much energy trying to figure out what that holds. On the other side of that is your past. If you think about the anger, the ill will, the regret, the remorse we might have, we harbor such negative emotions that exist from our past with the obvious knowledge that it can't change. Where does that past exist? That past exists in one place, and that's in your mind. Your mind only. Your past is unique to you. And that being said, it is there for one purpose, to help you make good decisions right now, right here and now. And if you could invest that energy that you're wasting from the past in something you can't change, or avoid trying to predict your future in something you've never been able to do before, and just invest that emotional energy into this moment, you would have a much easier time making decisions. We're so distracted by the anxiety that our future and past holds that we can't do that. I believe that it's absolutely necessary to try to find a way to deal with that anxiety. And obviously, if I believe that anxiety exists from what your perceptions of the future are and what your burdens from the past have been, what you need to do is learn how to stay in this moment. And staying in this moment is a difficult thing. I've used some tools recently where I'm trying to create some methods of modifying behaviors and thought processes where, I suggest using technology, which I absolutely abhor, but recognize I'm not going to stop it, so I better embrace it. And I've asked clientele to set their cell phones, for example, to chime at them every 2 to 3 hours. And in that moment when that cell phone chimes, I ask them, I want you to stop right there and say, okay, where's your head at? Where is your head at? Are you worried about something that's going to happen 2 weeks from now? Are you angry about something that happened yesterday with your spouse? How is this moment of life at this very time? I also ask my clientele if they can stay in that moment to ask themselves, what is the overriding emotional feeling that they have at that time? And understanding how to deal with emotion is not allowing your emotional state to dictate your behavior, but just the opposite, understanding your emotions and utilizing those to behave the way you want to behave. It's very, very difficult to deal with anxiety because of the sheer number and the unbelievable distraction all of those choices have created in our lives. We don't even see it. We don't even see the fact that a 16-year-old who's visiting me in my office with his mother sitting across from him, and I'm talking with him and realizing that his mother has breast cancer, and the young man is pouting because his mother's not feeling well, and he's more concerned about where she was supposed to take him after this office visit to go get a cover for his iPad. Kind of missed the point on that one, didn't he? And what's happening is we're delaying the emotional development of our youth by giving them all these choices. They don't have any emotional responsibility, and we're continuing to foster that type of problem. Living in the present, yes, I can give you some really good examples of that. I had the experience recently of having my sister-in-law come down and visit me with my brother, their 18-month-old child. On the way down here, they stopped at a drive-through window, again, making choices, and my younger brother was in a bit of a rush, and he didn't take the time to completely get his wife's order, and she was furious when they got through the window and she didn't get what she wanted, and they got in a tremendous argument. She came down to visit us, and the whole day she spent her time sitting on the beach while her daughter at 18 months of age was playing in the waves with her aunt. Her husband was enjoying the company of his brother, playing a game on the beach, and she sat there and could not even envision anything that moment had to offer her. Later on, when I brought that to her attention, she started crying. She realized, I know I can't help that. I can't help it. This is what happens to me. If she didn't have that drive-through window, it would have never happened. Trying to get her back in the moment, if she could have just stopped and looked around and said, wow, I'm going to use my senses to appreciate what's around me, it would have detracted from her emotional state of mind. We're very emotional beings, and one of the tools that I'd say would also work very well is if you allow your senses to distract you. So using your vision, your taste, your touch, your smell, using that sensory input to distract you from what you're dealing with in that moment emotionally. You can't think two things at once. So if you can appreciate the beauty of the ocean, or the blue of the sky, or the feel of the sand below your feet, or the joy that you might be seeing going on around you, you are living in the moment. When you can't do that, you've been distracted. You've been distracted by what your future is and what your past is. I think there is a very important role for prescription medicines in our society. I commonly say to patients who are apprehensive about taking a medication that they have to understand there is absolutely, positively nothing wrong with their brain. I use an analogy saying to them that if they were sheep herders in New Zealand on a mountaintop, would they need a medication for anxiety? No, their choices would be limited. The pace at which we're forced to live has created that anxiety by giving us all of this wonderful opportunity. That opportunity comes with consequences. So using medication to help filter out some of those vulnerabilities on the scales of anxiety. So I consider those kind of scales the anger you might have in becoming enraged, or the irritability and quick temper, the vulnerability we have when we're sad and we become tearful. What most of the medications that deal with anxiety do is they filter out those extremes of emotion, creating a smaller paradigm within which you have to work. So most of the commonly used medications, for example, what are called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, your Zolofts and Paxils and Prozacs and Celexas and Lexapros, those are all medications that work in your central nervous system to filter out some of the emotional burdens that are placed upon you. And they do a great job doing that. What ends up happening to most people is that anxiety, as you worry about this and worry about that and say, what if this, and worry about this and what if that, most of that anxiety ends up emotionally exhausting people. I end up seeing them as they are becoming emotionally exhausted with anxiety issues, or they've become completely emotionally exhausted, which I think is a pretty good definition for depression. You know, I have several pieces of information that I'd love to give further on, and hopefully the future will give me opportunity to do that. Not that I'm looking forward to it with expectation or anticipation, but that I'm looking forward to the opportunity to present some more information. I would say that if you can stay in the moment in life, you can utilize all the energy that you were created to have and to utilize in that moment, which is exactly where you were supposed to use it. You're not supposed to use that anywhere else other than in that moment. You think about your physical being, your spiritual being, your emotional being, all of those things need to come together, and when you can utilize those in an equal balance in that moment, it reaches very far into what the possibilities are for joy in life.